It was 2008, which wasn't a very good time for the nation or journalism, newspaper work. And the paper was looking for things to do, and we were publishing some books. And somebody here got the bright idea, let's do a book about big crimes over the years. And St. Louis is 250 years old this year. They asked me to do it. I mean, I did this for the newspaper. It's not like I bravely, took a sabbatical and ate ramen noodles hoping that someone would love my book. I mean, I did this for the newspaper. It was my assignment. And so for 8-9 months, I did the research, wrote the stories. Other people in the photo department and I found the photos. I'm proud of my writing. I love my little words like most people in newspapering, but the truth is what really makes this book are the nearly 200 photographs. I mean, newspaper photo files are as good as you're going to get in terms of a local record. And the Post-Dispatch files here, both clippings and photos, are good to about the late 1920s. Each one of the articles is newspaper feature length, and each article has whatever photographer we could find to go with it. And then at the end of the book, I've got about 26 pages of an essay-type chronology of mobs in St. Louis. One of the pieces I did was about the origin of the old folk song Frankie and Johnny. She shot her man 'cause he done her wrong. I mean, a lot of people remember that old song. The inspiration for that was an actual killing here in St. Louis. This lady was tired of her man running around on her, and he comes bursting into the little apartment one night in 1899, and she says he has a knife, and she has a .32 and uses it. So somebody in old St. Louis thought up a song, and so we have the Frankie and Johnny song, which has been brought back by numerous groups over the last 110 years. That started here. Another one was gruesome, but it was an international sensation. It was called the Trunk Murder. It was in 1885, and there were two Englishmen who came to America. They were traveling salesmen. They meet on the boat. They decide to go across America, and they wind up together at a nice hotel here in St. Louis called the Southern. One of them was richer than the other, and the poorer guy suddenly has a lot of money flashing around, and he tells everybody that his buddy, Mr. Preller, went out of town. And the hotel room starts smelling, and the chambermaids go in, and it winds up that his buddy's in a trunk, dead, several days. The police try to start chasing him, but he's taken the ship from San Francisco already. Now this becomes a big international case because you have two guys from England, you have St. Louis, you have the manhunt to the other end of the world, and the New Zealand police stop him. Two officers from St. Louis actually went to get him. It took them 10 weeks for the round trip. And when they come back to the train station downtown, half of St. Louis is there to see this guy. And interviews galore, and he winds up being hanged. We used to have a gallows at the police headquarters, like a lot of towns did. Another one, during World War I, there was a lot of hysteria about the Germans. Here in St. Louis, we used to have a Berlin Avenue. It was renamed to Pershing. The Wilson administration was pretty blunt about, demanding loyalty. And St. Louis has a very, very big German population. In fact, the German last name is the most common for this area here. And there was this poor guy named Prager who was a coal miner over on the east side, which is where the coal mines were. And he was from Germany, and he was a good guy, and he filed his alien reports and even tried to join the U.S. Navy. But a couple of the guys at the mine decided that they'd found a spy for the Kaiser. And it just gets worse. And this mob goes after Prager. A policeman grabs him and squirrels him into the city jail, But the mob just gets worse and worse, and they actually drag him out of the jail and march him to the west end of town. This is in Collinsville, Illinois, a town about 9 miles from downtown St. Louis. And they hang him. They lynch him. 11 guys, I believe, wind up being charged. The defense tries to turn it entirely into a matter of these were just patriots trying to do the best they could for the good old USA. And they wind up getting acquitted. So the Prager lynching is one of the really ugly spots here in town. My personal favorite in this book is the case of a woman named Nellie Muench. Nellie was a party girl. She'd married a doctor. They lived in a nice part of town. And she had this fancy dress shop that was what she played at. And, the dress shop went bankrupt in 1931. And she and some of her kind of shady late-night buddies cooked up the kidnapping of a Dr. Kelly, who lived in one of the very fancy private drives here in St. Louis. And so Dr. Kelly gets kidnapped. A reporter from here, the Post-Dispatch, is writing about it, and for whatever reason, the bad guys give up Dr. Kelly to John Rogers, the reporter. John Rogers takes Kelly to his apartment and gets the exclusive before he's allowed to take a bath and go home and see his family, but those were the good old days. Nothing comes of this for several years until this guy who runs a pool hall beer joint starts saying, I know the solution to the Dr. Kelly case. And so Nellie Muench winds up being charged. But the story gets a little trickier because she, meanwhile, has a boyfriend who's another doctor. And she tells the boyfriend that, golly, I'm pregnant. Well, she wasn't, but she starts this ruse about being pregnant. She actually wears these little tummy things. And shortly before she's supposed to go on trial for the kidnapping, there's an announcement that she's given birth. Well, okay, people can have babies. There's babies come when they will, if it's right before the trial. I mean, that's how things are. And they managed to get the trial moved to central Missouri, where Nellie's family has a lot of ties. This is a huge thing. Everybody in Audrain County and counties surrounding are going to this trial. I mean, Mexico, Missouri is mobbed with people who just want to see Nellie. And everybody wants to know about the baby. But she doesn't show up with the baby. And she winds up being acquitted. And mainly she was acquitted because her lawyers played big city versus rural. And they appealed to the jury about these, fancy boys and girls from the city, concocting this thing on poor Nellie, who comes from people like us. She gets acquitted, but the baby thing falls apart pretty quickly because the young teenage lady who had given birth and who'd given up her baby starts figuring out, oh, that's what happened to my little son. And Anna actually goes to court and tells the judge, that's my baby. And so the whole baby adoption thing falls apart, and her husband's, name is on a phony birth certificate and all this. And she does wind up getting convicted for the fraud related to the baby case. And then she does her time, her husband divorces her, she goes to live quietly in Kansas City, and she lives to 91. I would go back and I would read these articles, and it's 2014, everybody knows about the troubles of newspapers, but in the 20s and 30s and 50s and 1890, newspapers were the source of information, and it's a survey and a step through bad things that happened in St. Louis over the years.